don't waste time trying to do things that you don't feel passionate about. And if you feel like your passions are taking you in a different direction than maybe the type of work that you are currently doing or the where your comfort zone is, I would encourage people to lean into that and lean into learning new things and lean into just creative exploration, even if you don't necessarily know kind of what the outcome of it is going to be or what the usefulness of it is going to be. If you're excited about something, I think you should just do it and explore it, and you never really know where that will take you. And in a lot of cases, I think it'll take you into really surprising and exciting places.
Please welcome the brilliant Tim Zarki. Tim is a 3D artist and designer currently creating magic at Meta Reality Labs. Tim is also a Learn Squared instructor who teaches our Timeless Industrial Design Foundations course, which is available now. And when he finds time on his busy schedule, he also dabbles in digital alchemy to create mind-blowing visuals, all in the name of creativity and curiosity. In this episode, we get a stellar insight into Tim's journey and how his career and workflow has evolved over time, what creativity actually means to him and his relationship with it, how to assemble and maintain a super team of creatives, and we spend some quality time on Tim's spectacular generative design experimentations. This episode is packed full of info. Let's go, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Right, cool. All right, let's get going.
Awesome.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast, and I'm super excited for today's episode. We have the amazing Tim Zarki. Hello, Tim.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. And it goes without saying, or at least for me, you are one of my favorite creatives. Ever since I think I joined Learn Squared as a student, like back in 2016, and I think even before that, but we had that little hangout session, I don't know if you remember, with Momo and a few of the other guys.
I do remember that. It's a long time ago.
We got a chance to at least I got a chance to see, yourself and peek behind the awesomeness. And I'm sure people are way more familiar with you. But if they're not, please check out Tim's work. You see the links below, and obviously there's a Learn Squared connection as well, other than the student side of things, because you're also an instructor for us as well. But yeah, just to not go on a super long intro and a bit of a ramble, but yeah, man, like I can't wait to pick your brains upon the way you think, your creative process, and obviously all the things in between, because just to briefly touch upon why I think your work is awesome. Of course, on the get-go, it's super eye-catching, which is not important, but it's still super important in this day and age when, there's so much work out there. Like your work immediately gets the attention. But then obviously when you start looking a little bit deeper and seeing it's not just a pretty picture, there's way more things going on, behind the scenes, and the DNA of the way you create things is like, yeah, it's just super awesome to have you on. So for people who are not too familiar with you, maybe, how would you describe yourself?
Well, first of all, it's very kind of you. Thank you so much. I have fond memories of those days as well, before I was an instructor at Learn Squared, just hanging out with everyone. I made a lot of good friends that way. So, gosh, how would I describe myself? I think that's actually something that I struggle with, because I feel like my work is very diverse in terms of the different types of things that I'm interested in. And I think people who follow me probably realize that right away. My background is in industrial design, and so I enjoy designing products. Even, I guess I used to work as a sort of an actual practicing industrial designer, where I would spend my days designing real products for clients. Then at some point, I guess about three or 4 years ago, I made sort of like a mental transition away from being sort of like a practicing industrial designer to being more of a 3D artist, where, I have this sort of industrial design background and this sort of sensitivity for products and interest in products, and tangible, like real things. But then sort of my passions kind of shifted away from that to focus more on the creation of digital artwork, whether that is like product renderings, which is something that I do a lot because that's kind of the main focus of my job, or completely abstract 3D work or concept work that I'm just kind of doing for fun. Um, so I think the work that I have created over the years kind of spans across those different disciplines. So some of it is still very product focused. Like I'll still get ideas for new product concepts, and we'll want to kind of work on designing a concept and visualizing it to a really high fidelity, just for the sake of bringing an idea into the world. Like I don't really have a lot of ambitions to create real products anymore. But I might just have like a cool idea, and because I'm an industrial designer by education and background, like I just have this desire to like create it and want it to sort of be out there for people to react to. So I do still do that from time to time. But then I'm also doing a lot of stuff that's a lot more just conceptual, and enjoying exploring the possibilities that exist within different 3D tools. I think generative design has been a real sort of passion of mine for probably, I mean, honestly, since I graduated from college, and even a little bit before I graduated from college. It was something that I was really interested in, just as I didn't really understand how it worked at the time, but I was just kind of, I would see, industrial design projects and also like architecture projects that would incorporate kind of generative processes into their design. And I always thought that that was just really fascinating, because it was kind of like creating different sort of aesthetics that you would never be able to kind of create by hand, I guess. If you were going to craft something from scratch manually, you would never really be able to, you would never come up with that sort of form or those shapes or that language by yourself. And I was really fascinated by that. And so I guess that's another area where I've been exploring, is kind of looking at generative tools and figuring out how they can be used for, form creation, or the creation of patterns, or simulating interesting kind of like biological inspired processes. And that, I think, has really, it used to be like a pretty small part of how I would describe myself as a creative person, as sort of just like a side thing that I was interested in. And I think over the years, and especially this past year, it's become something that I'm really passionate about and have spent a lot of time focusing on. So I think if you look at, my Instagram page, for example, like the past, like, 9 or 10 posts are all things that are sort of rooted in exploring different generative processes and different tools for doing generative design and simulation. And that's something that I would love to talk more about, because it's
Oh, for sure.
really become a huge passion of mine lately.
So as you can see, like if anyone's looking at Tim's work right now or is familiar with it, it definitely shows in his work, as he's just explained now, because obviously you do many different things. You've touched upon a lot of different disciplines. You've practiced a lot of different disciplines, and obviously become very good at a lot of different disciplines. And obviously you mentioned just then about the generative design and all the other stuff that you do in that kind of field, as more like explorations, and even like a little snippet of the wider picture. Like, is this all happening live, or do you kind of make a conscious decision of like, I'm doing this now and I'm kind of leaving all the other stuff in the side? Basically, is this more like an impulsive thing, or more something that happens organically, or do you kind of make a conscious decision to tackle these specific projects that you do?
That's a really good question. And I've thought a lot about that myself, because I think, as a creative person, and, as someone who is very, I guess, passionate about doing personal work and learning, I think how you spend your time is really important, and kind of making conscious decisions about what to focus on at any given moment. Um, and it's something I actually have kind of, I feel like my approach to that is not very strict. And I think it's kind of interesting. So when it comes to, I guess, when it comes to my actual sort of professional day job, stuff like that, it was kind of a conscious decision to shift from focusing purely on industrial design, and kind of shifting away from that to be more of a 3D artist at my current role at at Meta, which I'm still getting used to saying. I still say Facebook a lot. Meta
You
is
get
the
fined
new
if you
name
say
of the
Facebook.
company. I don't think so, but I'm trying to be good about it. But I'm actually, that's another topic probably for, we can discuss that later, but I do have a lot to say about that. But I guess as far as your question, how I kind of decide what to spend my time on when it comes to learning, when it comes to exploring sort of personal projects, it's really like very organic as far as what I choose to spend my time on. And really, I'm the kind of person who has probably like a dozen different personal projects that are kind of in the works at any given time. And I often have ones that are sort of sit on the shelf for a long time, and then I'll return to them later once I kind of become interested in them again, or once I sort of have figured out, like if I was kind of stuck at some point with some sort of technical problem that I ran into, or just some sort of lack of like quite having the right inspiration, I'll put projects on the shelf for weeks or months and then come back to them later once I kind of have overcame whatever mental block I was dealing with at the time. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing. I'm very much the kind of person that just tries to focus on whatever I feel most passionate about working on in the moment when it comes to my personal work. And I feel like that allows me to kind of get the most sort of mileage out of my current energy, if that makes sense. Like if I'm really excited about a particular idea, I will drop whatever else I was working on and just focus on that for a while and see where it takes me. And that can be good because I feel like it allows me to really like leverage the full sort of extent of whatever I feel excited about at the time. But the bad thing about that is I'm really bad at finishing like long-term projects because I will lose that energy after a while and lose interest in what I'm working on or get frustrated with it. And like I said, put it on the shelf for a few weeks or a few months or whatever, and then hopefully come back to it. Sometimes I don't come back to it. Sometimes I do. But that's kind of the way that my brain works when it comes to personal projects, at least. Obviously, I don't have the ability to do that with my professional stuff because people expect that if I start a project for them, I'm going to finish it within a certain time frame, and I do. And maybe I think because I have that divide between the types of work that I'm doing professionally at my day job and then the types of work that I'm doing for fun in my personal work. I think I enjoy having that greater level of flexibility to decide what I want to focus on with my personal work. And, it doesn't have to be so rigid and so sort of project based. And, I don't really give myself deadlines or anything like that when it comes to the stuff that I'm working on. And I think that can be good or bad because, obviously deadlines are very helpful for making sure that you finish things. And there's definitely something to be said about, really sticking with one project from start to finish until it's done. Even if you're working on multiple projects at the same time, just kind of keeping yourself accountable like that. My girlfriend is really good at that. Like she also is a very passionate creative person, and she does a lot of personal projects, and she's really good about like when she starts something, she will continue working on it until it's done. And I'm just not like that. I start a dozen different projects and then, half of them get finished, half of them don't. And I'm kind of just okay with that. I've had to kind of come to terms with that over time because I think ultimately the way that I work on stuff is geared for the way that my brain works and allows me to get the most out of my the passion that I have for whatever it is that I'm learning at the time. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully that helps.
That's an awesome answer, and it's one that I didn't expect, to be honest. My perception of you and the way you work, and that's probably more so, I guess, how, and this is definitely another topic I'd like to get into later on, about how you, I guess, present your work, because it's so well presented, that it gives the illusion, or at least for me, I jump to the conclusion that okay, the way this artist works is the same way that they present, which is like it looks like it's completely in control, obviously, at least creatively, but also in terms of like time and in terms of the intention and everything behind it. And I'd love to get in more about how you are professionally with your mindset there. But like the way you just described how you work personally, and obviously, like it seems there's a lot of stuff that's still in the works that haven't been done yet. I just assume that that would be the way you work personally as well. So it's quite interesting to hear that I got it completely wrong, and it just shows that like misconceptions are quite easy to come by. But it's also encouraging too, because there's always like, at least when you think you know how something's made and it's different, it just definitely breaks down even own personal barriers that you might have in terms of what your own limitations and your own, I guess, abilities are. That if you can get someone else's wrong, you can even get your own wrong as well. And you also mentioned about how that you have to come to terms with the way you create. Now, is that something that happened by accident? Is that something that you took some time and went into a deep dive about, I guess, yourself? Is there something that specifically triggered that, I guess I'm asking? So how did you come to that conclusion?
Yeah, I don't think it was any like one specific moment that allowed me to learn that about myself, but I think it's more just examining like over time sort of how my creative process typically goes. And I kind of notice, when I sort of when I'm working on a personal project, like how motivated I am to focus on it, or I guess over time, like, do I lose motivation? Do I get distracted and want to work on something else? And I kind of like you can either try and be very disciplined about that and sort of not allow yourself to be distracted by wanting to focus on a different project or getting frustrated and wanting to quit working on what you're working on right now because it's difficult. Obviously, like I have to work through some of those challenges because every new thing that you might try to do is going to have difficulties and frustrations associated with it,
Mm-hmm.
and challenges that you have to overcome. But I think it's not so much that I allow myself to like give up on things and shelve things because they're hard. It's more that if I notice that my motivation for something is shifting away to a different topic, I'll kind of just allow that to happen to a certain extent, and be okay with having just a lot of different projects that are in various states of completion. And I think that's just something that I've learned over time. Like it allows me to do more, I think, than I would do if I just focused on one project at a time. Um, and I think that's ultimately a good thing.
I agree. And do you have any projects that I guess you've also kind of just let, I guess, gestate a little bit because you haven't been able to get the vision you wanted out yet?
I think it's less about getting the vision that I want out and more about running into like technical challenges or workflow challenges that I'm not yet sort of ready to solve, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the generative design work, like it's so technical that sometimes like I'll have sort of a vision for something that I want to be able to create, and I'm just don't have the knowledge yet to be able to do it according to the vision that I have, like be able to execute it the way that I want to. And sometimes I just have to like let that project sit for a while, focus on something else, and oftentimes by learning other things that are tangentially related, I will discover some piece of information or knowledge that I need to actually come back and finish that other project the way that I really wanted to. And that's happened on a number of occasions. And I think it just comes down to like uh, this is kind of a deeper thing that I feel about generative design, which is just that it takes a very long time to become really competent at it. And especially when you get into kind of like the programming side of it, it's extremely technical, and you're constantly sort of like learning new and better ways of doing things over time. And oftentimes those learnings will kind of unlock better ways of approaching previous things that you did in the past. And it's kind of like a continual sort of process of refining the way that you work, and refining the sort of processes that you've developed for creating things generatively. And I think maybe like my focus on generative design stuff is part of why that way of working makes sense, is because, oftentimes the roadblocks that I run into are simply just lack of understanding or lack of knowledge of how to do something technically. And it just takes time for me to discover a better way, or discover the piece of information that I need to sort of unlock that. And so I think that's part of why I have a lot of these projects that kind of sit for a while, is because I just don't have I have the vision for what I want to do, but I don't yet have the knowledge to do it. And so I just have to kind of build that knowledge very slowly over time. And there are certain thresholds that I'll reach where like finally I realize, oh, that thing that I just learned by doing something else, I can now bring that back and revisit this other project that I was stuck on, and now I have this new sort of knowledge and power that I can bring to it, and hopefully get it to a better place or finish it.
And when you get to that point where you do get to, okay, I'm not kind of like at the place where I need to be where I can figure this thing out, do you get like, what happens to you at that time? Do you get frustrated? Is it something that you just like comfortable in processing, thinking that, okay, cool, I know I'm not ready for this right now, let's just find a way to do that? Like, what happens to you, I guess, your creative process, your thought process, and even the way you handle these obstacles? Like, do you have a set way of tackling this, or is it again just something that you just let happen naturally?
I guess I just let it happen naturally. I will say it is very frustrating, especially if it feels like you have this vision, you're very close to being able to do what you want, but you're just not, you're like maybe 80% there, and you're missing that last like 20% or something of whatever sort of knowledge you need to be able to do it. I find that to be very frustrating because I think, it's natural, I think, as a creative person to want to push yourself and want to kind of get that last little bit figured out and solved. And sometimes you can, and sometimes it just takes more time. And I think I've just had to kind of become okay with, or just make peace with that, and be okay with it. And I think being really interested in a wide variety of different subject matter and different ways of doing things makes it easier for me to be okay with putting things on the shelf until later. Because if I get really frustrated by some sort of generative design project that I'm doing, I can just put it on the shelf and maybe not even do any like generative design personal work for a little while and just focus on doing some sort of industrial design side project or something like that. And because I have multiple different projects that are in different states of completion all the time, and because those projects are in different sort of not all of them are like generative design projects. There might be some industrial design ones, some like concept art ones, some generative design ones, whatever. I can hop around between those different subject matters and get my brain into like a completely different mode of thinking and creating if I got frustrated with what I was doing before. So I think that actually really helps keep me inspired and motivated all the time.
I can definitely concur with that. And that's something that I've experienced as well, where it's a case of, if you're frustrated or just hitting a brick wall or just even a ceiling on a particular, I guess, workflow or particular kind of discipline, if there is something else that is a different discipline but still creative, that frustration goes, or at least until you get frustrated with that thing, but then you can keep
exactly
and doing that. Do you ever get to a point where all of those things get frustrating and you just kind of switch off completely? Because it does come across, or at least my impression is that you always can find something for yourself to create. So are you just completely like someone who's always wants to create and has to create, or do you ever intentionally or even unintentionally just switch off from the creative side of things?
I think it's pretty rare for me to completely switch off. It's definitely happened in the past where I just get into kind of a creative rut and don't feel inspired to work on anything. But it's been a very long time, I think, since that's happened. And I feel like I've really, for better or worse, like I have this true just desire to make things all the time. And it's really, my favorite, like people ask you, what are your hobbies? And it's like, well, designing and creating things is really my number one hobby, and it's where I get the most sort of satisfaction and joy from. And so I really try to avoid getting into those ruts. And it has been a really long time, I think, since I've experienced that, which I think is really just the result of trying to nurture this sort of, I guess, continual just creative practice and really make creating things a habit that is something that you dedicate time to every single day, even if you don't have anything to show for it. I used to really feel a lot more pressure to, this is, I guess, changing the subject a little bit, but I just had this thought. I used to have a lot more, I guess, pressure that I put on myself to have something to show all the time. Like, have, constantly be creating new work that I can share online on Instagram, for example, or wherever else. And I think that pressure is kind of gone for me at this point. But I still, even if I have nothing to show, I'm still always working on, whatever projects I'm excited about at the time and making
Mhm.
progress on them and learning new things. If I get really frustrated, sometimes I'll just like watch some tutorials or something like that
Mhm.
and try and shift my brain to focus on learning something new instead of struggling with whatever I was struggling with. And I think just shifting it up all the time as far as the type of work that I'm focused
Mhm.
on really keeps me interested and prevents me from having those real, I guess, creative ruts and feeling stuck.
And you mentioned there about just always kind of being interested in this, I guess, this realm, this sphere of like creativity.
Mhm.
When did that begin for you? Has that always been the case for you?
I think it's always been the case for me. Like when I was a kid, I was the type of person who would just draw all the time. So like
Mhm.
I always had to have paper and a pen or pencil with me because if I had nothing else to do, I would just draw. And that was, as long as I can remember, that was how I was. And then in high school, I turned that into, I guess I continued to draw all the time, but I also started learning 3D software. And so I
Mhm.
was learning, uh, well, I guess not just 3D software, but digital tools in general. So I started learning Photoshop and Illustrator. And then, that gradually morphed into wanting to learn 3D tools like Blender was kind of my first 3D software and is still a software that I use all the
Mhm.
time today. Um, and yeah, that was kind of going on in high school. And I think after I graduated from college, I think I went through a short period of time where I was in kind of a creative rut just because I think going like making that transition from being a student to being a professional is like a huge sort of transitional period, and I felt very burned out from college just because my last like semester of school was really intense
Mhm.
working on my thesis project. And I was in a new city as well, so like everything was different and I needed to kind of just take a break. And so I didn't really have that sort of creative habit at that time. But then I discovered Learn Squared. Like that was right around the time when Learn Squared began, and right around the time when I realized that I was really passionate in learning more about 3D tools because I
Mhm.
had kind of dabbled in. I think I was dabbling in like 3ds Max in school a little bit, and like trying some 3D animation and learning V-Ray for rendering stuff like that. And I really didn't have as much time to focus on it as I wanted to in school
Mhm.
because I was, doing lots of industrial design. But I kind of identified that, 3D visualization and like 3D rendering was a passion of mine that I
Mhm.
wanted to explore more deeply. And after I graduated and once I discovered Learn Squared, I picked up Cinema 4D. I started using Octane to render
Mhm.
things and took a bunch of Learn Squared classes like Ash's UI data design class,
Mhm.
and then later like Michael Wrigley's classes and stuff like that. And those really, I think, reinvigorated my like desire to learn and to
Mhm.
create things all the time. And so ever since then, I feel like I've been working on sort of developing this, I guess, creative habit and sort
Mhm.
of creative practice in my free time. Continually trying to push myself and just make things that I'm excited about and learn new things and occasionally give back as well. Like with
Mhm.
the Learn Squared class that I made, and I want to do more educational stuff in the future too. So um,
Now that's
yeah.
awesome, awesome to hear, man. And like, just a few things I definitely want to touch upon, but just on your course itself, it's because I did a transport design at university, and obviously that's like got a lot of industrial design,
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff in there.
Absolutely.
But the way you drop it in your course is so potent compared to the kind of stuff that I learned at university, and that's not putting any shade on the institution that I learned at, but it's just the way the information you drop in there and the way you get to your conclusions, and obviously where it comes from ideation through to visualization, obviously creating the product itself, the way you research, select material, all that kind of stuff, and maybe even presenting it. That's like, I have a specific project that I'm still gonna make, but it's specifically what you teach in that course, and I
Oh, that's
can't wait to
awesome.
get that done. But it's just, yeah. So it's great to see, like, again, when I was like just taking courses myself and trying to grow my own workflow, seeing yourself and how you went from like you did I think you did the apprenticeship with a few of those courses you mentioned, even if you're just taking them, you on a few Twitch streams, and then seeing you create a course and that course being awesome as well. Like that's just cool to see in itself, like as a seeing, you know, one of your peers do amazing things. But then at the same time, it just shows that learning can go from, you know, you can quickly go from just as a student, switch to an expert, and then go back in student mode. It's almost like the same thing, but we kind of tend to just give it labels.
Mhm.
But you're a great example of how you can clearly be both and be awesome at that. But going back to like
Thank you.
say professionally, so like what's your professional journey been like? Because obviously you mentioned a bit like about how obviously your background, studying, and how you furthered your studies even more, and even to now, where you're almost like just being like a creative alchemist and creating all these amazing, crazy things. How does all that compare to your professional journey?
Yeah, I can give kind of the brief version of my, I guess the professional experiences that I've had and how they've led me to what I'm doing now. So when I was in school, I interned for a company called Minimal, which is an industrial design agency based in Chicago. And they're the kind of agency that does sort of industrial design work with a really wide variety of different clients. So they're always working on, you know, different types of products in different industries, which is really exciting because you get to work on just a lot of different stuff when you work there, which is cool. So I graduated from school and then I went to work there full time as an industrial designer. And kind of in the background, you know, doing all this stuff with Learn Squared and learning and kind of developing this 3D passion and sort of 3D skill
Mm-hmm.
set on the side. And ultimately, like my coworkers recognized that I had this kind of passion for 3D and for visualization and a little bit of animation as well. And they kind of continually sort of supported me in that interest and allowed me to kind of start to do more animation and more sort of I guess visualization focused work at my job, which was, I think, you know, the benefit of working for a small company like that is that they were just really supportive of my interests and trying to figure out ways to incorporate my interests into the work that I was doing for their clients. And so I was just really lucky, I think, to have certain opportunities within the client work line up for me to actually do more kind of animation and visualization stuff for them.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, I was just very fortunate to have amazing coworkers who really supported me and recognized that, like, you know, these skills that I was trying to build and this passion I had was something that they could sort of capitalize on and sort of help make the company better as a result. And so after, you know, trying to learn for a few years, eventually they sort of gave me a official capacity as sort of a visualization expert within the company. That was
Mm-hmm.
my job title. And I did a lot of their sort of final product rendering for different clients and some animation stuff. And also even started to do a little bit of generative design stuff for clients, where it was, I guess, where it made sense. Um, and then ultimately, I decided that in order for me to really grow as a creative person, I needed to change companies and change jobs. And I was just kind of hungry for, I guess, a different experience and seeing, you know, what else is out there. Because, you know, that was my first job after graduating from college, and I was there for a little bit over 3 years, and
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to see kind of what else was out there in terms of, you know, if I could really make my career about, you know, 3D visualization, where could that take me? And that was the point at which I took a job working for Oculus, which is owned by Facebook, which is
Mm-hmm.
now called Meta, which is very confusing. Um, so if I say Facebook, what I actually mean is Meta. I don't actually work on anything related to the Facebook app. I do work for Facebook, the company, which is now Meta, the company. Um, so if you hear me mess that up, that's what I mean. Still getting used to that. But yeah, so I've been at Meta for about a little over 3 years now, going on 4 years
Mm-hmm.
next year, and started working here as kind of a product visualization specialist. So my job was really to take the hardware that the industrial design team at Meta creates, initially, which was focused on VR headsets, and now the product categories have kind of broadened a little bit. Um, and it was basically my job to do all the final sort of product renderings that would go on the website, would go in advertisements, would go on the packaging. And originally, Meta would outsource a lot of that work to different agencies. And I think they recognized that they wanted to try to build more of that capability in-house, because it was, I think there's just a lot of benefits to being able to do your sort of creative work in-house when you can. And so they recognized that. And I was kind of someone they identified as a potential person to hire, because I had this industrial design background, which gave me a really good sort of understanding of products, and kind of really, seamless ability to work closely with the industrial design team. But then also I had this kind of passion for 3D visualization, which is what they needed. So that's kind of how that job opportunity came about. And originally, when I started, I was working by myself. And so a lot of the work was still being outsourced, just because I was only one person, and couldn't really fulfill all the different needs that the company had as far as visualizing products is concerned. But over time, I think they recognized that the work that I was doing was really valuable, and they wanted to be able to do more of it in-house. And so I was actually given the opportunity to either become the manager of a new visualization team, or hire my manager for this visualization team. And I actually chose the latter option, which was to find someone to be the manager of the team, so that I could still kind of continue the type of work that I was doing as just a 3D artist. I didn't really want to take on the, I guess, the burden of managing a whole team by myself. And part of that was I had never done it before, and felt a little bit nervous about the idea of managing people. Part of it was I knew that it would take away from some of the time that I could spend doing creative work, and I really just wanted to focus on continuing to do creative work. And so I decided to find someone to manage the team, and I found a guy who's now a really close friend of mine, named Clement Balavoine, who he did a Learn Squared stream a long time ago. He's a really talented guy who comes from kind of like a 3D fashion design background, and also kind of advertising background, and also studied industrial design back in the day. So he and I had just a lot of, I guess, common interests and common sort of way of thinking about things. And he ended up being kind of the perfect person to bring on to lead the team. So he and I worked together very closely for a little bit, and then were given the ability to build out the team even farther. And so we were able to hire two artists, a guy named Todd Hersey, who's a really talented motion designer, and a great woman named Brie Marie, or Brienne Gagg, some people know her by. And she's also just a really talented 3D artist. And we've brought on two additional artists as well. Zach Corzane is working with us right now, and then Brendy Wettinger as well. So at this point, we've got a team of 6 really talented 3D artists all working together, and it's kind of like the dream for me, because I never would have imagined being able to kind of, I guess, really handpick the people that I get to work with, and really build a team of passionate, creative individuals who each have their own sort of strengths that they bring to the table, and not just like technical skills, but also just their sort of creative vision, and the way that they look at things, and the ideas that they bring. And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm working with this team, and we are still kind of focused primarily on creating product visuals for all the different hardware that Meta is working on. But we also do some more sort of brand focused stuff as well, which is kind of been a big focus of our work lately. And I wish that I could talk more about that in detail. Unfortunately, I can't. But the work that we do, if you want to see it, you can look at like the front of the box of the Quest 2 VR headset is an image that I created, which was a big team effort with my team. Pretty much all of the product visuals on the Oculus website are things that my team created as well. And in the future, we're going to be working on an even broader range of different types of work for the company. So it's pretty exciting.
Sick. Now that sounds awesome on so many levels. Of course, like creatively, I'm probably going to say this a bunch of times throughout the podcast, but like, I know for yourself as an individual, like you're just a great creative, and even when it comes to visualization, when I think, when I'm trying to do my stuff, I always literally back my, what would Tim do? Sometimes I think like, what would Tim do? And I try and just emulate that, because you just like hit the nail on the head when it comes to how to present at least products or even just things in general. So you have a great eye for that, and obviously seeing how you've been
Thank
able
you.
to, like kind of build your own like creative Avengers, and just like have this amazing bunch of creatives, and just seeing, I guess, how many heads together can create whatever you guys are creating. I can just imagine
Mhm.
that it's like, I guess, creative heaven. No.
I mean, I feel very fortunate to be in the situation that I am, because I think it's pretty rare to be able to not only create bring together a team of people that you really enjoy working with, but also to kind of have a hand in shaping the type of work that your team gets to do. We're kind of constantly always pushing to do a broader and broader range of different types of work for the
Mm-hmm.
company, and I think some of that effort is finally starting to pay off. I can't talk about that in detail, but it's just really exciting to be working with this awesome team of people, and to be able to kind of increasingly broaden just the different types of work that we're doing. It makes the job, I think, it can be frustrating at times working for just a massive company like Meta.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of politics and just I don't know, just infrastructure and turnover and all kinds of things that go
Mm-hmm.
along with a job like that. But um, the people that I get to work with, and the type of work that we get to do, um, and sort of the creative challenges that we're trying to approach, are just keep it really interesting, and keep it really motivating. And I don't have any plans to go anywhere else for the foreseeable future, just because I really love the people that I work with, and I feel really optimistic about the future of the work that we're getting to do. So it's kind of a perfect situation, and I feel incredibly fortunate, because I recognize that it's a pretty rare situation to be in professionally, and I feel like I owe a lot of that to Clement, for just fostering all of these things within our team since he joined as the manager. But I also owe a lot of that to a guy named Peter Bristol, who is the head of the Meta Industrial Design team, and
Mm-hmm.
he has really kind of supported me, and also supported the growth of my team over the years that I've been here. He really, I think, believes in just hiring the best kind of creative individuals possible, and putting them together, and seeing what kinds of things they can create. So I have to say thank you to him as well.
That's dope. And like, yeah, Clement's someone I definitely want to get on the podcast as well.
Oh yeah.
Someone who's just like, obviously you work with him day in day out, so I don't need to tell you, but for the listeners, again, if you're not familiar, just check out his work. Have something flashing up right now just to um get a link to his work. But yeah, he's a creative genius. And just like something I'm fascinated about is, I guess, teams. And I've worked in different teams just through different industries ever since I started work as a kid up until now. And the dynamics within teams, how teams are formed, and like things you mentioned as well a bit earlier, like about politics and just things that can even derail a team, or make a team
Hmm.
successful. That is something that it just gets my attention all the time, and something that I'm fascinated about. And hearing how your team was, it seems like, well, like one of your generative design piece, like seemed to just naturally, organically grow and expand, and become what it has. Um,
Hmm.
like, how has that helped you as a creative in general, and even as a professional, just having like, because I guess it just sounds like you got a dream team, right?
I would say so. I feel incredibly lucky to have this team that I get to work with, and I think the benefits that working with them has brought to me are, I mean, first and foremost, just having the sense that every day that I go to work, I'm going to work with friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like people that I can not only work with professionally, but also talk to about, anything that's going on in my life, or, we're constantly like sharing inspiration or talking about, things that are going on in the world, and sharing our interests with each other. And I think that's something that's really special, that I don't think necessarily every like professional team operates that way. And so that's one thing that I love about getting to work with them. And then the other thing is that they really make me better as a creative professional. I think it's very easy to kind of become set in your ways when you're working by yourself. You kind of find whatever workflow feels right for you, and then it's very easy to kind of just stick with that and not necessarily continue to explore new ways of doing things or new tools. And I think working with a team of people who are better than me in a lot of disciplines has really made me better as well. It's kind of opened my eyes to different ways of doing things, or just kind of forced me to improve my own processes, because obviously I want to be someone who is easy to work with. And we all kind of want to be on the same page as far as the technical aspects of our workflow, and making sure that we can all work together on the same project seamlessly and share files and stuff like that. And so really, like, the people that I work with have introduced me to, I guess, better workflows, better tools, better plugins, better everything. And those are a lot of things that I feel like on my, like, left to my own devices, I would not necessarily have had the motivation to learn or to explore or adopt in my workflow. And so, I think we all make each other better, and that's a huge benefit of being part of a team like this.
I think you touched upon something really important there, and especially, I guess, like, people who maybe don't work in a team environment, or maybe like freelance and they're hired, like work for hire, and they come and do the job, and obviously then the job's ended. About, yes, you got the professional aspect where everyone's got their skills, they've got their job to do, and they have to obviously deliver what their deliverables are. But then you mentioned obviously the human aspect, like checking in how people are, and whatever they're going through, and helping them deal with that. Because especially when you work somewhere full time, you probably spend more time, or as much time, with your colleagues as you do with your own family or loved ones.
Exactly.
So in effect, in theory, whether you like them or not, they are equally your family. So it makes sense, at least on a professional level, just to get, for productivity, if everyone's kind of clicking or checking on each other or supporting each other, that's obviously going to be beneficial, at least in a commercial sense. But then even, like, say, as a professional, a lot of the time, especially, I think, and this is obviously just my opinion, in the creative field, people are hired just for their skill. And once, you extract the skill and then just move on. The human side is often overlooked, or maybe just people don't have the understanding to even how to even, like, broach that topic and just see, like, okay, just to check in on people, or not even just so much checking in on people, but just like growing with that person, almost like, you would a sibling, in fact, and just going for the ups and downs. So just to hear that that's how you guys are behaving, just shows that is at least a good blueprint if people are trying to build their own teams, or even just, themselves, maybe they don't look at teams in that specific way. Just having that different, like, I guess, insight or perspective in that can really maybe change the way you work. And obviously this is from your own perspective, but would you say the rest of the team feel the same way you do, as far as you can see?
I think so. I hope so. As far as I can tell, I think so. And I think, yeah, we talk about this a lot. We're all very grateful to have this kind of team relationship with each other, and I'll kind of recognize that this is pretty rare and special, and so I think we all feel grateful for that.
I mean, that's cool, because, and it's rare, I guess, for now, and hopefully it's something that becomes less rare, because
Yeah, definitely.
I guess, and again with teams, and you probably just touched upon there as well, and especially with somewhere like Meta, where it's like a behemoth of a thing, where there's so many moving parts. There's just so many things happening in companies I've worked at, where there's like turnover of staff, change of management, couple of people that just maybe don't want to be there, can be very disruptive. To keep that kind of on track and at least just focus on the job is, hard enough. And then to get all those extra things to make things that, feel great is even harder. So, but to show that it's possible. And how long has this team been? When did you start the team off again?
Well, so I started working at Meta by myself and did that for about a year.
Right.
So a year in is when I got to hire Clement to manage the team, and then very shortly after that, we got to hire Bree and Todd. And then this past year, we got to bring in 2 more contractors to kind of flesh out the team even farther. So it's been, I guess, about going on 3 years,
Wow.
having a team, and about a year of being a team of 6. So
That's awesome. And yeah, man, I'm happy like checking on you again in like 3 years and see how that's developed.
We'll
You
see.
might have like a mini village of all these creatives. But I just want to ask one thing. Again, one thing with teams is that I've discovered sometimes that can just derail the harmony of a team, or just not so much the team itself, but maybe how well a project can be. There's so many, like with people themselves, there's always so many factors that just make a person, and then having a bunch of those and then trying to do work, obviously there's just potential recipe for either things to go wrong or just not be at their fullest. One of them that I found is, and it happens for different reasons, sometimes it's as insecurity, sometimes just people feel they have to be a certain way, is when egos get involved. Has that been the case for you guys at all? Even for yourself maybe, and you maybe have to temper that? Or do you guys have a system where if that does rear its head, you have a way to deal with that?
Yeah, I don't feel like that's really been a huge issue for us, and I feel like it's just a fact of who we are. I think all of us are people who have a tendency to be humble, first and foremost, when it comes to the creative work that we do. And I think that we all kind of take a lot of pride in the work that we do for sure, and want to have some level of creative ownership over the work that we do. But I also truly feel like we all recognize that like we're in this together, and our end goal is to make each other better and to make the work that we're doing better. And I think the only thing that I have to check personally is just that I come from this sort of mentality of being kind of like someone who's very comfortable working by myself and sort of being in my own bubble, and having sort of ownership over the stuff that I'm doing. And I'm very comfortable working that way. And so for me, it hasn't been as much of like a problem of ego management. It's more just a problem of like opening myself up to collaboration with others and allowing other people to take ownership over part of the work that I'm doing. That's been actually, I think, the more challenging thing for me, just as a creative person. I really enjoy like having ownership over what I'm doing, and it takes, I think, a certain level of maturity to recognize that like other people will make your work better if you allow them to. And so it's better for everyone if you kind of open up and share, and allow other people to have a hand in what you're doing. And I think one thing that's really cool about my team, which I think has helped us to foster that sort of mentality, is we actually did a couple of projects that were kind of like side projects that were completely unrelated to our jobs, that kind of helped us really bond as a team and sort of foster those sort of creative relationships. We did, well, I guess I worked with Todd on a sort of promo video for a keyboard, a mechanical keyboard by the company RamaWorks. He and I worked together with a couple other freelancers that are friends of his, and did kind of like a keyboard spot, which was really cool. That was kind of my first time working directly with him on a side projects outside of work, and I felt like that was just a really positive experience for me and for him too, I hope. And then after that, we also all did a project together, Clement and Bree and Todd and myself, for there's a Chinese fashion label called Hamkus, which makes like very kind of like dystopian science fiction sort of inspired clothing.
Mhm.
It's really cool. I think everyone should check them out. It's probably not going to be anyone's cup of tea necessarily. If you're, I guess, depending on your fashion taste, I shouldn't
Mhm.
say that. It's very kind of out there and very cool, very inspiring, but not necessarily something you're going to wear every day, unless maybe you are. I don't know. I shouldn't make any assumptions, but it's a really cool brand. I love what they do. And Clement has a really close relationship with them. And so he kind of had this project to do a kind of like a bunch of sort of campaign visuals for a new collection that they were going to be putting out. And originally it was something he was going to work on by himself. But towards the end of it, he realized like, man, it would be really cool if we had like a motion piece for this project or for this for the launch of this collection. And at that point, he reached out to the team and said like, hey, I've got this project that I'm doing on the side. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if we all worked on this together? And we all kind of were down for it and did it on our free time and created this kind of motion spot for this fashion collection. And it was just really fun to work on something that was completely different from the type of work that we do during the day,
Mhm.
all together in our free time. And I think that was another experience that really helped us kind of bond as a team and sort of I guess feel really confident about collaborating with each other. And so, those are both kind of things that I would not expect any kind of professional team to do, to have kind of your professional work that you're doing during the day with each other, but then also be working on side projects outside of work together at the same time. I think that's pretty rare and pretty special. And I think definitely helped us kind of solidify and grow as a team. So, and kind of help foster that sort of spirit of collaboration that I mentioned.
That's again awesome to hear, and it's kind of similar to your own approach to your own personal projects, where it's like there's something separate to, I guess, professional stuff or maybe other disciplines you do, and it's cool to hear that you kind of done the same thing, or you guys all do the same thing within that professional sphere, but still find time to flex those different creative muscles, keep your creativity fresh by doing these extra projects, but still to high level. So yeah, that's super inspiring to hear from my perspective, even to see as well. Those projects you mentioned, I have seen those, and they're sick, they're awesome.
Thank you. And yeah, it was really fun to kind of get to explore each other's kind of passions as well, because
Yeah.
obviously, like, Clement comes from a fashion background. And so, we all got to kind of learn about what it's like to create, a campaign for a fashion brand, which is something I had never done before. And then, with Todd's passion for mechanical keyboards, like that is a whole like subculture and world. It's a big hobby for a lot of people,
Mm.
and it's a hobby that Todd is really passionate about as well. And so getting to learn about that world through him through that project was really rewarding for me too. So I love just the being able to kind of share in the different sort of interests that my coworkers
Yeah.
have and learn from those.
And during these projects, what was the last thing that you noticed that directly affected something that you create personally, just by obviously experiencing your colleagues' creativities or their perspectives and just their, I guess, hobbies or the reasons why they create? Is there anything that stands out to you, jumps out to you immediately that you can pinpoint to thinking, oh, that's because of what I did with this person or that person, or what I got from this particular project, that you would maybe have never had come to the conclusion of yourself otherwise?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can't pinpoint like a specific thing that I have incorporated into my own work. But what I will say is I think what I learned from both of those projects, which was really inspiring to me, was just kind of seeing how Todd and how Clement kind of like lead a project and sort of direct the vision of a project when it's a group effort like that.
Mm.
Because like I said before, I'm kind of this person who is very comfortable kind of working by myself and
Mm.
sort of focusing on my personal projects, which are kind of solo endeavors most of the time. And I don't have a lot of experience, kind of like leading these sort of big collaborative projects like that, or at least I
Mm.
didn't at the time. and where a lot of different creative people are involved, and people are all bringing their ideas to the table, and trying to kind of incorporate them all into a bigger and better whole. But obviously, someone has to kind of be guiding the overall vision and keeping the project on track. And so, watching Todd kind of tackle that with the RamaWorks project was really cool, because he kind of acted as sort of the director, and sort of had his vision for what he wanted the piece to be, but of course also opened up to ideas that we contributed. And um, it was just a really nice collaborative process, and it was really cool to kind of see how he approached that. And I had never really, I've worked on sort of motion pieces like that in the past, but it was always just kind of me by myself, basically guiding the process and guiding the creative vision. So seeing how he kind of led that creative process with a team, who are all kind of contributing ideas and working together with different skill sets, that was really cool, and definitely kind of eye opening for me as far as how I could approach doing that type of thing in the future. And the same goes for Clement, leading the Hamkus project that we did together. He is also someone who I think is a really kind of visionary sort of creative person when it comes to directing projects. And I can see that both in the way that he leads the team at Meta. I think he has kind of transitioned a little bit more into kind of this like director role for the team, because he's the manager. He's kind of providing us with a lot of the sort of the vision, and allowing us to kind of execute it, and contribute our own ideas. And I see that kind of in his sort of creative trajectory as well. Like he, is a really talented 3D artist and very hands-on when he needs to be, but also has like this great capacity for, I think, directing other creative people and collaborating with them. And he has great ideas. And so I think working on that project with him kind of just gave me a better appreciation for how you can come to projects from sort of like a creative direction, I guess, and creative vision approach, and kind of inspire other people to sort of help create that vision together.
And over the last like 3 or so years, since you've seen the genesis of this now epic team, and how it's grown over the years, what kind of key pieces of like maybe advice, or just maybe not just behaviors, but little things to keep an eye on, or perhaps to even like behaviors to encourage for people who maybe are currently in teams, or were looking to build a team, who maybe finding not difficulty, but who could definitely take it a step further, either whether they either the management side, or someone senior, or maybe someone who's just part of the team, doing everyday things. Like, are there certain things that jump out to you that you think, okay, if you just nurture this, keep an eye on this, or adopt these kind of behaviors, that will definitely aid you in how you benefit a team, and how you can contribute a team, and even just how the team can contribute to yourself?
Mm-hmm. I think first and foremost, like, it's really important to recognize like every person's sort of individual strengths, and try and create opportunities for them to really shine, and put those strengths to work, on whatever kind of projects you're doing. Because I think everyone wants to feel like ownership over the chunk of work that they're doing, and sort of feel like they're doing their best work and being able to utilize all of their skills to the fullest. And so I think, that's one thing that's really important, is to kind of recognize what each person's strengths are, what they bring to the table, and try and like sort of tweak or craft the nature of the project itself to sort of utilize that person's strengths to the fullest. I think that's one thing. And then of course, making sure that everyone feels like their voice is heard when it comes to contributing ideas, and having a voice in terms of the outcome of and the direction of a project is really important too. I think a lot of the challenges and struggles that we've had to deal with as a team, I think, come from our team was really formed during the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, Clement and I had been working together for a year before that in person, But when we started to grow the team beyond just the two of us, that happened right around the beginning of the pandemic. And so, um, in many ways, we are kind of a remote team that has spread out across the country.
Mhm.
And that has been, that presents its own challenges as far as communication and, checking in with people to make sure that, everyone is doing okay. And, I think thankfully Facebook has pretty good, sorry, to say Meta has pretty good kind of processes in place for managers to make sure that, they're kind of checking in continually with the people that they oversee, and making sure that everyone feels good about the work that they're doing and feels like they are sort of able to contribute. And if they're struggling with anything, it's kind of an opportunity for people to discuss those things. But beyond just the infrastructure that Meta has put in place for managers, I think we have really one of the strengths of my team is that we're really open about communicating with each other when we're struggling. And it's been kind of a rough couple of years, both just creatively and also just outside of that, just living our lives. You know, dealing with the realities of the pandemic and everything has affected all of us in different ways. And I think the biggest thing that we have been able to do to sort of overcome that or help just tolerate that is just communicating really openly when it's hard. When we're struggling with things, or when it's tough to feel motivated sometimes, or you know things are happening with our families that are not so great, that are related to the pandemic or whatever else. One thing I'm really thankful for is that we're really open about those things with each other, and can talk about those things as friends as well as coworkers, and really be there to support each other when things are difficult. And so I'm really grateful for that, and I think that's kind of allowed us to really kind of continue functioning at a high level, and functioning well as a team, despite all the challenges that come with remote work and just dealing with life during this time, because it's kind of a crazy time when you think about it.
For sure. Now that's well put, and yeah, definitely. Like, I guess communication is the biggest one, right? It's like it's the key thing.
Absolutely. Hmm.
And even like as yourself as a designer and a visual artist, like it's all about communicating, whether it's an idea or a product or wherever it might be.
Hmm.
And like going back to your personal work,
Hmm.
um, everything from even your product design to your industrial design to the I remember when you started like sharing like your Houdini stuff and the experiments came up with that,
Hmm.
and straight away you could see like the stuff you did in industrial design, how you applying that to these very beautiful abstract things. I remember your taxonomy project, which I thought was like super super cool and still do.
Oh, thank you.
And then even to now with all the generative design stuff, I remember a few years back you did like these growing cell things that inspired me to create something just from that as well. And seeing where that is now and the stuff that you've just, I think, it was only a few months ago you released the those growing like almost organic cell type things, like fluid vein type things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to know more about that, man. So
I would love to talk more about that.
like what's going
So
on with
so
this? Where is this coming from? And why are you doing this?
so that is all something that has come about over the past year, really. Um, so I think I have to explain this. I have to go back to kind of my interest in generative design in the first place, and sort of um, I guess for me, like it's really just a an exploration of like how can computers and sort of technology aid us as designers in
Hmm.
sort of exploring creative possibilities, and exploring different visions that we might have. And I really think the reason why generative design is so interesting for me is because it's really like taking what computers are capable of doing for us,
Hmm.
and sort of exploiting it to explore new sort of visual frontiers, and new like form development, and all kinds of things that we would not necessarily come up with on our own without being able to leverage that technology.
Mm.
Um, and so that's kind of why I think generative design was interesting to me in the first place. And my interests in it have just kind of evolved over time as I've explored new processes and new ways of doing things. And I think Houdini is really sort of the stepping stone that led me down this path. I discovered Houdini a little bit after college, like right around the time when I actually very shortly after starting to learn Cinema 4D, I also
Mhm.
started to learn Houdini on the side, and it was a real struggle at first. I think a lot of people are very intimidated by it as a software because it has so much depth to it, and it's very technical, and it can be really challenging to just wrap your brain around how it works. And it feels like the learning curve takes forever to kind of surmount in the beginning. But I think, just as a creative tool, it's my favorite piece of software. And the reason it's my favorite piece of software is because it just feels like there's limitless possibilities
Mm.
contained within it, which is true of any creative software. But Houdini really allows you the ability to kind of craft your own way of working and leverage a lot of these kind of really deep procedural workflows to do
Mhm.
things that would have been impossible in pretty much any other software package. So I started learning Houdini because I was really just interested in continuing to explore sort of what possibilities exist within generative design. And I think Houdini is a really good platform for that, especially when it comes to developing, 3D forms, or, doing kind of like time-based simulations
Mhm.
that kind of allow you to create these systems that sort of grow and evolve over time in really interesting ways. Um, but so I've been kind of working on that for a while, for many years. I'm just kind of getting better and better at Houdini and learning more and more different ways of doing things in Houdini. And I think when you start out with Houdini, you're very sort of it's a very visual program. So you have kind of like these node networks that
Mhm.
you build, and you can kind of see the information flow and sort of the visual relationships between different parts of your node network, and how different steps in the process lead to other steps, and how everything's all related. And that's really cool, especially for me as like a visual person. I think that like being able to visualize the node network and
Mm.
see how it works is very intuitive. Um, but after a certain point, you kind of run into a wall where you really have to start learning programming in order to kind of continue to push what you're able to do. And I realized that pretty early, looking at just the types of work that other people did in Houdini, and watching tutorials from places like Intagma, for example, which
Mhm.
is a great source for learning Houdini. Immediately you realize like, oh, like these really talented artists are using a lot of code in their work in order to be able to either like speed things up, or to actually like unlock new possibilities within the software that you wouldn't really be able to do without programming.
Mhm.
And I was really kind of like I guess I've kind of had some exposure to like very basic programming throughout my life. Like I in high school would learn how to program my own websites, for example, like doing basic like HTML and
Mhm.
CSS stuff. And that stuff is like pretty straightforward and pretty easy to learn. Um, and then so I wasn't afraid of code necessarily, but I did feel very much at a disadvantage just as someone who's like a very visual thinker.
Mm.
I think, you know, going into learning programming, like you really have to be in just a completely different frame of mind. And it's like very analytical, and it's very, I guess, logical, and you're dealing with a lot of information, and it's the end result is visual, but the process of getting there is not visual at all. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of the thing that's really challenging about it for me. But I realized that if I wanted to continue to push my like generative explorations, and just the my ability to do really cool things, like I needed to learn programming. And so I started by just doing basic stuff through, Intagma tutorials and things like that, where they teach you, little sort of like code snippets
Mhm.
in the native programming language that Houdini has, which is called Vex. Um, and so I got pretty comfortable with that, and I got to the point where I could kind of like, come up with my own code for doing different things. And even just like simple things, like you might write 1 or 2 lines of code just to do like a very simple operation, or more complex things where you might have like multiple different chunks of code that are generating geometry, or creating some sort of simulation over time. um, I got to the point where I was relatively comfortable with doing stuff like that in Houdini. um, but this year, one thing that really has kind of unlocked a lot of creative possibilities for me is a class that I took. And this class is called Intro to Compute Shaders. It's taught by a guy who goes by Arciliath online. You can look up his Gumroad page if you want to learn more about the class. I'll give you a link to it, Aaron, so you can share this link. But it's basically a class that is all based in Unity, the game engine. And it's a very, very, very programming heavy class. And basically, what the class is about is teaching you how to write code that executes on the GPU itself. So
Mm.
when you're working in Houdini, like you're kind of in this sort of abstracted world where like you're writing code, but you don't really have to think too hard about sort of how that code is being executed on the back end on your computer. Like Houdini is very CPU driven, so like a lot of the code is being executed on the CPU, and when you're doing simulations, the speed of those simulations is based on how fast your CPU is usually. Houdini does have the ability to do some like stuff where you're actually writing GPU code, but it's kind of a little bit limited, and not something that's really very common, I think, as far as Houdini workflow is concerned. But the real amazing thing about doing this class is that it taught me that like you can leverage the power of like a modern GPU to do so much more than I thought it could do. And you can do that by like tapping into actually like programming directly for what you want the GPU to do for you. And so what this class is all about is basically like how can you write code that runs on the GPU and use that ability to do really interesting simulations and things that you wouldn't really be able to do otherwise. Um, and so basically, I took that class, and it just completely blew my mind, and really, it was like I'm trying to remember what the duration of the class was. It probably took me about a month or so to go through the actual sort of content of the class, maybe a month and a half.
Mhm.
But after it was over, I just had so much more that I wanted to do with it, and so much more that I wanted to explore. And so I kept working on it, and I kept kind of taking the ideas that were presented in that class and continuing to kind of delve deeper and try and sort of make them more and more complex and add my own ideas to them. And that's kind of where a lot of the work that I posted recently, that's kind of these like sort of petri dish sort of disk
Mm.
simulations that look incredibly like organic and fluid and sort of evolve over time. That's where that sort of body of work has come from, is starting with this class, which is kind of the foundation for learning how to do this stuff, and then kind of continuing to explore on my own, um, just the possibilities that exist within this workflow. And it's hard to even talk about it because I realize like what I'm saying is like sounds very abstract, because it's very technical, I think, to get into the details of what's actually happening. But on a high level, what I can say is like what you're seeing when you watch one of these is you're looking at a two-dimensional image, right, which is made up of pixels. And on that two-dimensional image, you've got millions of particles that are moving around. And those particles are depositing color onto the image as they move. So they're basically leaving a trail behind them.
Mm.
And that's what allows you to see the particles. So you're not actually seeing the particles themselves, but you're seeing the trail that they leave behind as they
Right.
move around. And it doesn't look like particles. And the reason it doesn't look like particles is because there are at least, I think the minimum amount that I have in any of these simulations is probably like 5 million.
Mhm.
And some of them go up to like 20 or 40 million particles, which is crazy and something I didn't think was even possible. without like a supercomputer.
Mm.
But that's one of the things that I learned during this class is like, if you're, tapping directly into the power of your GPU, and writing code that's really optimized for it, like you can actually have like crazy numbers of particles like that are all simulated in real time. So that's the other thing, like the speed at which the simulations are evolving. I did speed up a few of them just to like make it more interesting to watch because some of them are kind of slow to evolve.
Mhm.
But all of them are happening in like a real time speed within
Wow.
Unity. So you can actually interact with the simulation parameters and see those changes in real time. Um, a lot of times when you're working in Houdini, for example, doing a simulation, you have to wait, minutes or hours
Mhm.
in some cases to see the final simulated results. And that's not the case here. Like here, you're getting like exactly what you see is what you get like immediately.
Wow.
And it's really cool because that allows you to kind of like tweak things really on the fly and like explore, if I change this one simulation parameter a little bit, like what does that do? And you can see the result immediately. And that's incredible. So like the stuff that I'm sharing on Instagram is literally just like screen recordings of the simulation as it evolves in Unity in real time. And
Oh, wow.
um, like I said, a lot of these are using just insane numbers of particles that are just moving around on like a 4K texture and leaving behind these trails that you can see. And the complex behaviors are just sort of simple rules that are applied
Mm.
to those particles. So all the particles are following the same set of rules, and what they're doing is they're moving around on this texture, and the particles kind of have the ability to sort of sense the texture, so they actually read from it. You can imagine it like they have eyes, sort
Mm.
of. So the particles are kind of looking around in front of them at the texture map, which is kind of a record of where all the other particles have been or are going. They can look at it and measure, values from the texture and then make decisions about where they should go based on
Mm.
those values. So it's kind of like creating sort of like smart particles that
Yeah.
are able to make decisions based on their environment. And that's where these really organic kind of behaviors come from, is that you're creating sort of these particles that behave in a similar way to how a real like living organism might behave on a very fundamental level. So being able to detect the environment around you and react to it in some simple way based on changes that you see is kind of like the fundamental way that life works. Single-celled organisms are doing the same thing. They're moving around in some sort of a substrate, whether it's water or something else. They're able to like sense the presence of other organisms around them, or sense food sources, or changes in temperature, changes in light, or changes in the presence of chemicals, things like that. And then react to those changes. That's how sort of life works on a fundamental level. And these GPU simulations are trying to model that on like a very basic level. And that's kind of where you're able to get these really crazy sort of organic, fluid kind of simulations. And a lot of them are kind of inspired by there's this type of slime mold called Physarum,
Mm.
which is a real organism that you can look up. And a lot of the computer simulations are kind of like based on the behaviors of that slime mold on a fundamental level. Um, and so some of them, like you'll get things that look kind of like these networks of like kind of intersecting pathways, which
Mm.
is kind of like the organism trying to sort of optimize the way it carries nutrients around. That's kind of based on this sort of real life organism that it's inspired by. But then because you're in a computer and you can make the rules of the simulation whatever you want, you can kind of get away from stuff that looks sort of like a realistic depiction of some of these organisms that
Mm.
exist in real life, and get into just the land of kind of abstract exploration and very alien looking stuff that is really cool. So I feel like I'm rambling now, but that's
No,
just
no.
it's been a really fun thing to learn about, and just being able to kind of program stuff at that level has kind of just unlocked a lot of new possibilities for me. And it's also kind of changed the way that I think about other sort of generative design work that I'm doing, if I can leverage the GPU to make it faster, or if I can leverage these new kind of programming skills that I've been working on developing to just do more advanced things that I wouldn't have been able to do before. I feel like I feel like every once in a while you learn something that ends up just being like a catalyst that takes your work to a new place. And definitely like taking that class was sort of a catalyst for me to just rethink the way that I approach kind of all the generative design work that I'm doing, and just also just reframe what I thought was possible as far as the types of simulations that you can do on a computer, and how you can leverage your GPU to do stuff for you. It really opened a lot of doors for me as far as that type of stuff is concerned. So,
wow. Do you need a specific kind of GPU for this, or could you do technically anything?
You can use any. I don't think it even necessarily has to be an NVIDIA GPU. I have all my simulations are running on a single 2080 Ti card. So if you have anything similar to that, you can do very similar stuff, and I'm sure that you can do a lot even with less capable GPU than the one I have.
That generative design like truly like fascinates me, and even just the way you've been able to like capitalize on it and utilize it, obviously from an aspect of like from perspective of like an audience, it's just literally it's been looping on my screen since we've been talking, and I haven't got bored of it. Because I'm on your website. It's like, I think it's the first project that's on your website for now. So it's just, it's super, super cool. But, and you kind of just answered it a little bit as well, where I was just going to ask, like, how is this feeding into the other stuff? And is generative design kind of more and more where you're heading towards, or is that almost like where you kind of live now, at least in your creative space?
I think it's just my current sort of greatest passion as far as side projects are concerned. Like, a lot of the side projects that I'm doing right now are different generative design focused things, and I can't really explain. I don't really have like any intention with that other than it's just really exciting, and I feel really passionate about wanting to explore it more. And it feels like the possibilities are sort of endless as far as what you can create within that space. So yeah, I still have other side projects that are more industrial design focused or concept art focused, etc. But I think that just taking that class kind of really reinvigorated my passion for wanting to do generative design stuff, and just kind of opened my eyes to what's possible. So I would highly recommend, like, if anybody is interested in learning how to do these kinds of GPU simulations, if you have the wherewithal to learn programming, or if you're already kind of comfortable with programming, I would highly recommend taking that class, because it just truly changed my perspective about how computers can be leveraged to create art, honestly. So yeah.
And like, what is exciting you now, like, I guess, future technologies or workflows that you haven't adopted yet? Is there anything that's kind of on the horizon for you?
I think now my primary goals are just to continue taking these skills that I've been building, and exploring new kind of generative spaces with them. So, like, a lot of generative processes are inspired by nature, and so you might look at something like slime mold, for example, like the Fasara mold that I just mentioned, and say, okay, how can I create work that's inspired by this? And I think a lot of my like list of sort of potential projects are generally just taking inspiration from a new place, like leaf venation, for example, which is something I just posted on Instagram recently. Trying to build a system that sort of replicates the veins that you see in leaves. A lot of the future projects that I want to do are kind of just like exploring other kind of like natural processes, or things that you find in nature that are really beautiful, and trying to leverage the same sort of processes to create artwork. And each time you explore a new sort of space like that, you end up learning a lot, and it presents a new set of challenges to overcome. And so I think I just want to continue to explore different different inspiration sources from nature, and different generative processes that are sort of leveraging those sources of inspiration to create more stuff. And really, it's just I don't have any end goal with it other than continuing to feel inspired to create things, and just seeing where it takes me.
Sick. Looking forward to seeing the rest of that journey as well. And just from yourself, like, you're a great instructor, you're great at communicating theories and ideas. Any more learning we can expect from you? Any courses or anything, or do you have anything in the pipeline for that?
Well, I think part of this like reinvigorated excitement for generative design has made me want to teach something related to generative design, because I feel like it's something that a lot of people feel inspired by, but don't necessarily know how to get into. And so my team actually did kind of an internal workshop this past year where we sort of helped teach ourselves Houdini stuff. So, I had some coworkers who, hadn't really used Houdini very much, but were interested in learning more about it and interested in incorporating it into their workflow. And so we did kind of like an internal workshop to help kind of teach ourselves sort of the basics of Houdini. And that really inspired me to want to create some sort of a class that's focused on kind of like basic generative design principles in Houdini, and with a focus more on like form generation, because I think a lot of existing content that's out there for Houdini is very focused on sort of visual effects and simulation and things like that, whereas I'm more focused on like design and form development and how generative design can be used for those things. And so I would love to make kind of like a sort of fundamentals class for generative form development in Houdini, as kind of like a gateway for people to not only use Houdini in their work, but also explore generative design as kind of like a broader topic. And so I have been working on kind of like an outline for that, but have not actually started to build that yet. But it's definitely something that I'm planning to do, and would love to share with everyone. So
well, I'll be the first person there to take it as soon as you do. 100%.
Well, that means a lot. Thank you.
Tim, just before we wrap up, any final thoughts from yourself to other students that you've had in the course so far, prospective ones that I'm sure would take your course now after listening to you? Any final thoughts for them?
Gosh, I just feel like my thoughts are that it's a really exciting time to be a creative person, and I feel more inspired now than I've probably ever felt. And I think if I was going to give advice to people, it would be to try and like cultivate that inspiration within your own work. Whether it's, I mean, you could be passionate about anything, but I think, I would focus on advising people to kind of follow their passions, because, like I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, I kind of allow myself to put projects on the shelf for a while if I don't feel passionate about working on them, or if I feel stuck. And I think, what I really try and do is just focus on whatever I'm most passionate about in the moment. And that kind of allows me to kind of maximize my creative output, I guess. And I would encourage other people to do the same. I think don't waste time trying to do things that you don't feel passionate about. And if you feel like your passions are taking you in a different direction than maybe the type of work that you are currently doing, or where your comfort zone is, I would encourage people to lean into that, and lean into learning new things, and lean into just creative exploration, even if you don't necessarily know kind of what the outcome of it is going to be, or what the usefulness of it is going to be. If you're excited about something, I think you should just do it and explore it, and you never really know where that will take you. And in a lot of cases, I think it'll take you into really surprising and exciting places. So I guess that would be the advice that I would like to leave everyone with.
Well said, Tim. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, it was great to chat with you. Thank you so much for having me.
A massive thank you to Tim for joining me today. and dropping that wisdom. I hope you find it as useful as I did. You can find links to Tim's Learn Squared course, Industrial Design Foundations, in this episode's show notes, as well as links to the incredible people Tim mentioned in this episode. And if you're enjoying the podcast so far, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, as we have many more episodes in the pipeline for you. Till next time.